Welcome to Connexions, church together at home, online and in the church building. Today we're going to have a look down a rabbit hole. So let's watch this short clip as an introduction. So the crazy white rabbit runs by, full of hurry and bustle, and the little girl is hooked. She follows the rabbit, unable to help herself, and as she does so, wham, she ends up falling into his hole. And a whole new world of unexpected, uncertain life begins for her. A whole new perspective on life opens up for Alice. Have you watched any of the versions of the Alice in Wonderland films over the years, or read the book by Lewis Carroll? On one level, of course, it's a delightful story, isn't it, of childhood adventure and imagination. It lords curiosity. Curiouser and curiouser is a line you often see in the film. And it celebrates the companionship that Alice experiences over a fun meal, and inevitably it ends happily. At the same time, though, the story has been critiqued as portraying or even being inspired by a drug-induced experience. And it's a fantasy of chaos and euphoria and illusion that hallucinogenic drugs can provoke. A darker side to the story. In more recent times, it certainly is a story that's been associated with mental health. And that phrase, down the rabbit hole, has in some quarters become synonymous with the experience of how things like anxiety or depression can draw you into another world, one that's difficult to bear as your whole sense of reality is challenged and life begins to look negatively quite different and becomes difficult to navigate because the experience that you have is so very uncertain. I hope I haven't ruined the adventurous delight of a classic novel as I share those different insights into the story. The fact is, though, isn't it, that rabbit holes are a fact of our lives. We experience them, and when we do, things begin to change in our emotions and our stamina and our ability to keep perspective on things. If you're like me and you have spent time down a rabbit hole of worry or resentment or annoyance about something, or a grief that's come into your life, or that sense of hopelessness when something has occurred that seems just too difficult to handle, you'll know that your usual compass for navigating life does not always work, in the world that opens up down the rabbit hole. Things like feeling disorientated come in. We get confused. We often experience anxiety. We have lack of energy. Sometimes we also have a lack of faith. All these things begin to kick in because what is usual in our life has changed, and things literally begin to feel like they're out of control, that we're down this rabbit hole and we can't see a way out, that it's hard to bear. One of the things that I found particularly powerful as I read the Gospels, and at the moment many of us are reading through the Gospel of Luke, aren't we, and taking in that sense of what Jesus is saying and doing as he ministers to people from Luke's perspective. One of the things I find powerful is the way in which Jesus is seen and heard reaching out and offering hope to people who are experiencing challenge and reality in their lives that have left them with a sense of being on the fringe of their family or of their faith community or of their social community. Perhaps another way of expressing that is Luke is revealing how Jesus steps into the rabbit holes where people's lives encounter various issues that leave them feeling stuck and in that place of disorientation and difficulty. And as Jesus steps into their lives, his presence brings with it a new perspective. In chapters 9 onwards, we see the disciples travelling with Jesus as he travels and journeys towards Jerusalem. And they are perpetually faced with how Jesus cuts across the barriers that suggest that a person's situation would exclude them from experiencing the positive nature of faith, of healing or comfort and transformation that Jesus offers. Luke shows how Jesus' presence with these individuals, even those stuck in rabbit holes, makes a huge difference to their reality and their life. I love the fact that Luke focuses on those who are poor, those who don't appear to be free, those who have every reason to feel themselves to be unworthy of Jesus even being near them. Luke focuses on that and shows how Jesus does presence himself in people's real lives. There are examples through the gospel as you read it of how people affected by hunger matter to Jesus, and he steps into their situation. People who are struggling with mental health issues are not outside of Jesus' care, and he deals directly with some of those issues. Jesus draws alongside people who are experiencing terminal illness, people who are unpopular, people who have a low social status. And time again, you see Jesus drawing alongside people who are anxious and having something to say about what anxiety does to us and how we can know a different way forward. Jesus reaches out to people who are experiencing death. There's lots of times too, isn't there, as you read through the gospel, where you'll see how Jesus just does cut across that sense of the okay and the not okay people in terms of reputation, and he draws alongside them. He presences himself with them, and he expresses his love and care. He also deals quite frequently in the gospel account with people who are ill in lots of different ways, and how exposes how that illness has led to poverty in their lives and sets them free from the things that are causing that poverty and gives them the opportunity for new hope. Another thing that I've discovered as I was reading through this time, and I guess I knew it, but it seemed to be reaffirmed to me once again, is that ageism is something that Jesus speaks into. He ministers to the very elderly. He ministers to the very young. No one's excluded from being involved and the opportunity to be involved in a life of faith. Just imagine what the impact of seeing these stories on a TV reality show would have today. It would be so uplifting and transforming, wouldn't it? In comparison to some of the reality TV we watch. I think the power of Jesus would just go viral across the media if this gospel was being lived out on the TV. Don't you? What a hope-giving Saviour Jesus is. Saviour, saved from our situation and saved for God's kingdom and God's hope. Luke reveals just how Jesus' presence brings freedom from the constraints and the hopelessness we face as we encounter life's rabbit holes. It isn't easy, is it, when we experience times when a rabbit hole opens up for us or threatens to emerge, or actually does lead us into a place where our perspective is just so thrown and our sense of hopefulness seems to fade away. These days, during COVID, I think there is a real potential for us to go down lots of rabbit holes in terms of that sense of hopelessness. But the news doesn't help us, does it? And we're perpetually battling in this land of uncertain news, unhelpful news, negative stories that can lead us into a place, particularly I think in our mental health, to a place that feels like a rabbit hole. And we're seeing an increase in issues around mental health right now that I think do require for us to be open and honest and real about how we're feeling. The church is a community where we celebrate the love and the power of Jesus, how he knows us, he forgives us, he saves us, he transforms us. What a story that is. Yet, ironically and sadly, it is sometimes a community where we can find it difficult to be open and honest about our inner battles. Maybe we fear judgment if we are open, or are unsure about whether having struggles or doubts or feelings of hopelessness at times when we believe we're going down a rabbit hole mean that we're bad Christians or that we have no faith, and so we keep it to ourselves. Perhaps we simply feel our faith is a private matter and we don't particularly connect our life to our faith. Yet those things really do go together, don't they? Our understanding of Jesus in our lives will surely make a difference to the good and the difficult times in our reality. Even in Luke's day, Jesus' upside-down kingdom ministry approach that freed prisoners and that honoured those who were deemed poor was quite frowned upon. People's reality was shamed or pushed aside by the religious leaders, and the messiness of some people's lives was deemed unacceptable, even by the disciples at times. And Jesus was dissuaded from engaging with those in life's holes. Being real can be quite a vulnerable experience. But look at how Jesus responded to people's reality. We take a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the Gospel of Luke. There are 5 things that particularly have impacted me as I've been reading. That time when Jesus stands with the woman shamed by her lifestyle, and he advocates for her. You know the story. She generously pours oil, perfume, over Jesus' feet and is criticised for her her generosity, her radical way of using the resources. But really, she was being criticised for being who she was, wasn't she? She was a prostitute, and how could Jesus associate with her and accept something for her? Yet he advocated for her, and he loved her, and he accepted her. What a powerful message that is for us. Just as we are, where we are right now, the person we are right now at this moment, whatever our situation is, Jesus is present and will presence himself with us, will draw alongside us, because he sees us and he loves us without judgment. How amazing is that? I noticed too that Jesus recognizes people's emotions. He was moved by the cares of those around him. Our emotional and mental well-being matters, and it does not exclude us from experiencing Jesus' presence with us. I think that's something really important to notice, that, one of the things that Jesus did, God became fully human and experienced what it is to live in this world. He understands our emotion, and it doesn't exclude us from knowing his presence in our lives. Another thing that's related to that, I think, is that Jesus invited openness and responded to it. What is it that you want me to do for you? He asked. Stating our need to Jesus is a way in which we grow in faith. Honesty in our prayers and through our sharing in safe groups is a way in which we can open ourselves to a new experience of Jesus' loving presence with us. Saying what it is that we need Jesus to do for us is part of our life of faith. Jesus often offered a different perspective, didn't he? He stood with the disciples in their own rabbit holes and he invited them to be transformed. Their view of the storm was fear, even though Jesus was in the boat with them. And his challenging response to them was, have you no faith? Do you not know that I'm here? He offers a very different perspective when we're in the rabbit hole. Sometimes when we're in a specific frame of mind, or we're facing a challenging situation, inviting Jesus to help us to see him in that time with us can really change how we see the future and how we see our way through to the light at the end of the tunnel. I am the light of the world, said Jesus. And I think a powerful story on the cross. It's never too late or too difficult an issue for Jesus to step into. It's controversial, isn't it? Because the criminal on the cross who asked him questions had got issues in his life that had obviously affected other people in a negative way, and justice is a very challenging issue. But sometimes our burdens or rabbit holes just do seem too big or too uncomfortable or controversial to resolve or to live through. Yet this story, Jesus responds to this man at the end of his life, a life that did have unworthiness in it, was forgiveness and the offer of restoration. It goes beyond what we can imagine. Recently, I've been following the emergence of some resources and discussions on the Methodist way of life. I don't know whether you've picked any of those up along the way. Perhaps you received a copy of the cards that were produced by our district a couple of years ago, whilst Roger Walton was still chair of district. It's an initiative that he particularly has taken on and is talking about within the Methodist Church. There's too much for us to cover about it today, but something perhaps we'll look at in future days. In brief, though, the Methodist way of life reflects back actually to the very heart of issues on which Methodism was founded, and invites us to rediscover these in our church relationships and in our sharing. The ideas and the resources are rooted in principles of sharing together in ways that open us up to deepening our experience of Jesus' presence and perspective within the realities of our everyday lives. Many of you, if you've been around the Methodist Church for a long time, will remember the idea of the class meeting and the bands and the different ways in which Wesley, as he first ministered to those around as he was travelling, encouraged people to be in small groups, to share their experience and to ask questions about where does their faith kick in to those realities in their everyday life. The Methodist way of life is very much taking us back in some ways to that. And although it's called the Methodist way of life, actually, really, it's the Christian way of life, isn't it? It's an encouragement for us and a set of resources to help us to engage with one another in accountable relationships. In a nutshell, really, it's calling us to live out our life of faith like the first disciples lived. Here's a snapshot from Acts chapter 2. They spent their time learning from the apostles, and they were like family to each other. They also broke bread and prayed together, and everyone was amazed by the many miracles and wonders that the apostles worked. All the followers met together, and they shared everything they had. They would sell their property and possessions and give the money to whoever needed it. Day after day, they met together in the temple. They broke bread together in different homes and shared their food happily and freely whilst praising God. Everyone liked them, and each day the Lord added to their group others who were being saved. A picture of an accountable, sharing, open life that, to me, speaks of, I'm down a rabbit hole. Can you help me to see Jesus here? Maybe you would like to be involved in a small group like that. It's something for us to talk about as we go forward as church. Even in these Zoom days, we could join together, couldn't we, to share a little bit more of what it's like in our lives and to encourage each other on a deeper level to keep on even in the rabbit hole times. Graham Kendrick wrote a song that I think speaks right into the heart of some of the rabbit holes of life. I hope in listening to it, it will help you to turn this into a prayer and a reality of Jesus with you in your days.
For the joys and for the sorrows, the best and worst of times, for this moment, for tomorrow, for all that lies behind. Fears the crowd around me, for the failure of my plans, for the dreams of all I hope to be, the truth of what I am. For this I have Jesus, for this I have Jesus, for this I have Jesus, I have Jesus. For the tears that flow in secret, in the broken times, and for the moments of elation, all the troubled mind, for all the disappointments, all the sting of old regrets, all my prayers and longings that seem unanswered yet. For this I have Jesus, for this I have Jesus, for this I have Jesus, I have Jesus. For the weakness of my body, the burdens of each day, for the nights of doubt and worry when sleep was fled away, needing reassurance and the will to start again, a steely-eyed endurance, the strength to fight and win. For